Asterisk, asterisk, Part 1. Shadow of a bargain. Asterisk, asterisk. The oil lamp flickered against the frost-covered window pane, casting dancing shadows across the rough-hewn walls of the Bennett homestead. Outside, the Wyoming Territory wind howled like a wounded beast, rattling the shutters with icy fingers. Clara Bennett pressed her face against the cold glass, watching the snow swirl in the gathering darkness of another bitter December evening in 1875. "Get away from that window, girl!" Her father's gruff voice cut through the silence. Samuel Bennett sat hunched over the kitchen table, a half-empty bottle of whiskey at his elbow, counting coins with trembling hands. "You'll catch your death." Clara didn't move. At 19, she had learned that sometimes stillness was the best defense against her father's unpredictable moods. She could see her reflection in the glass auburn hair pulled back in a simple braid, green eyes that folks said held too much fire for a proper young lady. Her mother used to say those eyes came from her Irish grandmother, along with a stubborn streak that ran through her like an underground river. "Did you hear me?" Samuel's chair scraped against the floor as he stood, swaying slightly. "I heard you, Pa." Clara turned slowly, her hands clasped in front of her worn calico dress. The fabric had been mended so many times it looked like a patchwork quilt, but she kept it clean and pressed. Pride didn't cost money. Samuel's bloodshot eyes narrowed. "Good. Then you'll hear this too. Pack your things. Just the necessities." Something cold that had nothing to do with winter settled in Clara's stomach. "Where are we going?" "We ain't going nowhere. You are." The words hung in the air like icicles, sharp and dangerous. Clara's hands tightened until her knuckles went white. "I don't understand." Samuel laughed, a harsh sound that held no humor. "Course you don't. Always did have your head in them books instead of paying attention to what matters." He took another swig from the bottle. "You're getting married. Tomorrow." The floor seemed to tilt beneath Clara's feet. "Married to whom I haven't." "Ethan Cole." Samuel spat the name like it tasted bitter. "Lives up in the mountains. Keeps to himself mostly, which is probably for the best. Considering." "Considering what?" Clara's voice came out steadier than she felt. "Considering what they say he done in the war." Samuel's smile was cruel. "But he's got money, and that's all that matters now." Clara took a step back, her spine hitting the wall. "You're selling me." "Now don't be dramatic." Samuel waved the bottle dismissively. "It's a business arrangement. He gets a wife to keep house and whatever else men want wives for. I get enough to pay off Big Jack Morrison before he takes my scalp, and you get a roof over your head and food in your belly. Everybody wins." "How much?" The question tasted like ash in Clara's mouth. Samuel's face darkened. "That ain't none of your concern." "How much am I worth?" "Pa." Clara's voice rose, that Irish fire sparking in her eyes. $50 100, what's the going rate for daughters these days?" The slap came fast, snapping Clara's head to the side. She tasted copper where her teeth cut her lip. $200, Samuel said quietly. "Plus he's forgiving the 40 I already owed him from last spring. You should be grateful. Not many men would pay so high for a sharp-tongued spinster with no dowry." Clara touched her stinging cheek, feeling the heat bloom under her fingers. $240. That's what 19 years of life amounted to, less than the price of a good horse. "I won't do it." The words came out clear and strong. Samuel's laugh was uglier this time. "You think you got a choice. You think the law cares what some girl wants. You're my daughter, my property until some other man takes you. That's how it is. How it's always been." He moved closer, his breath sour with whiskey. "Besides, would you rather I couldn't pay Big Jack? You know what he does to men who welch on debts. You want to see your old PA buried in a shallow grave come spring." Clara closed her eyes, seeing Big Jack Morrison's scarred face in her mind. The man collected debts with a Bowie knife and a smile. She'd seen what was left of Tom Henderson after he'd failed to pay up last summer. He promised me you'd be a gentle bride. Samuel continued, his voice taking on a wheedling tone. Said he wanted a woman with soft hands and a quiet way about her. You can do that, can't you? Clara for your old PA. Gentle, soft, quiet. Everything Clara wasn't. Everything she'd never wanted to be. But what choice did she have run in this weather? With no money and nowhere to go. The frontier was unforgiving to women alone. She'd heard enough stories about what happened to girls who tried to make their own way. When? The word came out hollow. He'll be here at first light. The preacher's coming too. Samuel seemed to deflate now that the fight had gone out of her. It'll be proper, all legal and blessed. You'll see. Might even be better than staying here. Clara doubted that, but she nodded. What else could she do? She climbed the ladder to her small loft room, each rung feeling like another step toward a scaffold. Her few possessions looked back at her, a Bible that had been her mother's. 3 precious books she'd managed to save. 2 dresses, a wool shawl, and a small wooden box containing her mother's wedding ring and a lock of her hair. Clara sat on her narrow bed, running her fingers over the worn cover of Jane Eyre. She'd read it so many times she could recite passages from memory. Jane had faced worse and survived. Jane had found love and freedom. But Jane was fiction. And this was Wyoming territory in 1875, where women were traded like cattle, and the law stood firmly on the side of fathers and husbands. Through the thin floor, she could hear her father moving around, probably finishing the bottle. Soon he'd pass out, and the house would fill with his snores. Clara pulled out a sheet of paper and her mother's old pen. If she was to be sold tomorrow, at least there would be a record. December 20th, 1,875 inches, she wrote. Tomorrow I am to marry Mr. Ethan Cole, a man I have never met, for the sum of $200 and $40 of forgiven debt. I am told he wants a gentle bride. I fear he will be sorely disappointed. She paused, then added, They say he is a killer from the war. Perhaps we are well matched after all, he who takes lives, and I who have had mine taken. The wind picked up outside, sending snow devils spinning past her window, somewhere in those mountains. Ethan Cole was preparing for a bride. What kind of man bought a wife? What kind of woman submitted to being bought? Clara folded the letter and tucked it into her Bible. Tomorrow she would find out. She didn't sleep that night. Instead, she sat by the window, watching the snow fall and the darkness deepen. The oil lamp burned lower and lower, its light growing weaker as the hours passed. She didn't refill it. Let it die, she thought. Let everything familiar fade before the dawn brought her new life crashing down. As the first pale light touched the mountains, Clara heard horses approaching. 2, no, 3. Her father stirred downstairs, cursing as he stumbled around. Clara stood, smoothed her best dress, a faded blue cotton that had seen better days, and pinned her hair up with steady hands. She took one last look around the loft. This had been her world for 19 years. By tonight, she would be in another house, another life, another cage. The knock at the door was firm, decisive, not the knock of a man who doubted his welcome. Clara, her father's voice was thick but urgent. Get down here! Clara picked up her small bundle of possessions and descended the ladder for the last time. In the main room, 3 men stood waiting. She recognized Preacher Williams, thin and nervous as always, clutching his worn Bible. The second man was her father, trying to look presentable despite his bloodshot eyes and unshaven face. The third man could only be Ethan Cole. He was taller than she'd expected, with shoulders that spoke of hard physical labor. His face was weathered by sun and wind, making it hard to judge his age, somewhere between 30 and 40. She guessed. Dark hair hung past his collar, and his eyes were the color of winter sky, gray and unreadable. He wore simple clothes, but they were clean and well-mended. A Colt .45 hung at his hip, as natural as breathing. Those gray eyes found hers and held. Clara lifted her chin, meeting his gaze straight on. If he wanted gentle and quiet, he'd made a poor bargain indeed. "Miss Bennet." His voice was deeper than she'd expected, rough as mountain stone. "I'm Ethan Cole." Clara nodded, not trusting her voice. "Right then," Samuel said too loudly. "Let's get this done. Preacher." What followed was the strangest wedding Clara could have imagined. No flowers, no music, no well-wishers. Just 5 people in a cold room, speaking words that bound 2 strangers together in the eyes of God and law. When Preacher Williams asked if she took this man, Clara hesitated just long enough to see her father's hand twitch toward his belt. "I do," she said clearly. Ethan Cole said his vows in that same stone-rough voice, never looking away from her face. When it came time for a ring, he produced a simple band of silver, worn smooth with age. It fit her finger perfectly, as if it had been waiting for her. "You may kiss your bride," Preacher Williams said, already backing toward the door. Ethan Cole studied her for a moment, then leaned down and brushed his lips against her cheek. His beard was softer than she'd expected, and he smelled of pine soap and leather. "We'll be going now," he said, straightening. Clara watched her father count the money Ethan handed him, not even trying to hide his greed. $200 in gold certificates. Her price, paid in full. "Take care of her," Samuel said, but his eyes were on the money. Ethan's jaw tightened. "Better than you did?" Before Samuel could respond, Ethan took Clara's bundle and headed for the door. Clara followed, pausing on the threshold to look back one last time. Her father was already turning away, the money clutched in his hands. Outside, 2 horses waited. Ethan's was a solid black gelding, while a smaller brown mare stood beside it. Without a word, Ethan helped Clara mount, his hands careful and impersonal at her waist. He tied her bundle to the saddle, then swung up onto his own horse. "It's a day's ride," he said. "We'll stop midway to rest the horses." Clara nodded, gathering the reins. She'd learned to ride on farm horses, but this mare was different, alert and responsive. "Her name's Rosebud," Ethan said, noticing her assessment. "She's yours now." The first gift of her married life was a horse. Clara didn't know whether to laugh or cry. They rode out as the sun climbed higher, painting the snow-covered landscape in shades of gold and blue. Behind them, the Bennett homestead grew smaller and smaller until it disappeared entirely. Ahead lay the mountains, dark with pine and promise and danger. Clara stole glances at her new husband as they rode. He sat his horse like a man born to the saddle, alert but relaxed. His face gave away nothing, but she noticed how his eyes constantly scanned their surroundings, marking every tree, every shadow. A soldier's habit, she realized, or a hunter's. The wedding ring felt strange on her finger, heavy with meaning she didn't yet understand. She was Clara Cole now, wife to a stranger, riding into a wilderness that might swallow her whole. But as the wind caught her hair and the mare moved smoothly beneath her, Clara felt something she hadn't expected, a tiny spark of hope. She was bought and sold, yes, but she was also leaving. Away from her father's fists and bitter words, away from a town that had already written her story. What lay ahead might be worse. Ethan Cole might be the monster they whispered about. But for now, in this moment between her old life and her new one, Clara Bennett Cole allowed herself to believe in possibilities. The mountains waited, silent and eternal, and somewhere among them, a rough-hewn house where her story would truly begin. Asterisk, asterisk, Part 2. The House Among Mountains and Storm. Asterisk, asterisk. The trail wound higher into the mountains, each turn revealing vistas that stole Clara's breath. Pine forests stretched endlessly, their branches heavy with snow, while distant peaks scraped the pale winter sky. The beauty was savage, untamed, nothing like the tidy farms and settlements she'd known. They'd been riding for hours when Ethan finally spoke. "Storm's coming." Clara looked up at the sky, noting the heavy clouds gathering like gray wool. The temperature had been dropping steadily, and the wind carried the metallic scent of snow. "We'll make it before it hits," he continued, more to himself than to her. "But it'll be close." Clara pulled her wool shawl tighter. She wanted to ask how much farther, but pride kept her silent. She wouldn't be the weak city woman he probably expected. Her backside ached from the saddle, and her fingers were numb despite her gloves. But she'd freeze solid before complaining. Another hour passed before Ethan pointed to a narrow valley between two ridges. "There." At first, Clara saw nothing but trees and shadows. Then, as they descended a switchback trail, she spotted it. A log cabin nestled against the mountainside, smoke rising from a stone chimney. It was larger than she'd expected, with a covered porch and what looked like a small barn or shed attached. "You built this?" The question slipped out before she could stop it. "Every log." There was no boast in his voice, just fact. As they drew closer, Clara noticed the details. The logs were fitted together with precision, the chinking fresh and well-maintained. Glass windows, real glass. Not oiled paper reflected the darkening sky. A split-rail fence enclosed a small corral where two horses raised their heads to whinny a greeting. Ethan dismounted first, moving with the fluid grace of a man comfortable in his own skin. He reached up to help Clara down, his hand steady at her waist. For a moment, they stood close enough that she could see the fine lines around his eyes, the faint scar that ran through his left eyebrow. "Welcome home." The words were simple, but something in his tone made them feel weighted. Home. This wilderness cabin was her home now. Ethan led the horses to the barn, while Clara stood on the porch, uncertain. Should she wait for permission to enter? Was there some ritual expected of new wives? "Door's not locked," Ethan called over his shoulder. "Never is. Not much point out here." Clara pushed open the heavy wooden door and stepped inside. The first thing that struck her was the warmth blessed, enveloping warmth from a well-banked fire in a massive stone fireplace. The second was the unexpected orderliness. She'd expected a bachelor's chaos, but the main room was neat as a pin. Handmade furniture, simple but well-crafted, was arranged with careful thought. Shelves lined one wall, and her heart jumped when she saw they held books, dozens of them. A table and two chairs sat near a window, and a rocking chair faced the fireplace. "Oh," she breathed, moving toward the books like a moth to flame. Shakespeare, Milton, even some novels, Dickens, Cooper, and was that Shelley? Her fingers traced the spines reverently. "You read?" It wasn't a question. Clara spun around. Ethan stood in the doorway, watching her with those unreadable gray eyes. "Yes, do you—" She couldn't hide the hope in her voice. "When the nights are long." He moved past her to add wood to the fire. "Bedroom's through there. You can put your things away." Clara followed his gesture to a door she hadn't noticed. The bedroom was small but clean, dominated by a bed covered with a colorful quilt. A wooden trunk sat at its foot, and hooks on the wall served as a wardrobe. Another surprise awaited a small shelf holding more books and what looked like carved wooden figures. She picked up one of the carvings, a wolf, so detailed she could see individual fur marks. "These are beautiful." "Just something to pass time." Ethan's voice came from the doorway. He seemed uncomfortable with the praise, shifting his weight like a boy caught doing something foolish. Clara set the wolf down carefully. This man who'd bought her like livestock read poetry and carved delicate animals. Nothing made sense. "I'll show you around," he said, already turning away. "Storm'll hit soon." The tour was brief but thorough. The kitchen area with its wood stove and well-stocked pantry, the root cellar below, filled with preserves and stored vegetables, the necessary outback, connected to the house by a covered walkway, a luxury in winter. The small barn held feed for the horses, tools, and stacks of split firewood. Spring water comes from uphill, Ethan explained, showing her the pipe system he'd rigged. Doesn't freeze if you keep it moving. Learned that the hard way first winter. How long have you lived here? 6 years come spring. 6 years alone in this wilderness. Clara couldn't imagine it. The first snowflakes began to fall as they returned to the house. Within minutes, the gentle dusting became a whirling curtain of white. The wind picked up, howling through the trees with increasing fury. Inside, Ethan busied himself with practical matters, checking window latches, bringing in extra firewood, filling lamps with oil. Clara stood uncertainly by the fire, unsure of her role. There's stew in the pot, Ethan said without looking at her. Bread in the box. We should eat before it gets worse. Clara moved to the kitchen area, grateful for something to do. The stew was simple venison, potatoes, carrots, but well-seasoned and hearty. She found bowls and spoons, sliced the bread, and set the table like her mother had taught her. They ate in silence, broken only by the storm's mounting fury. Clara kept stealing glances at her new husband. He ate methodically, efficiently, like a man who viewed food as fuel rather than pleasure. You cook well, she ventured. Had to learn. He paused, then added, You'll take over now? I expect woman's work. The word stung, but Clara kept her voice level. And what's man's work? Hunting, wood-cutting, keeping predators away. His eyes flicked to the rifle mounted over the door. Plenty of all three out here. I can learn those too. That got his attention. He studied her across the table, lamplight casting shadows on his weathered face. Most women would be crying by now, demanding I take them back. I'm not most women. Beginning to see that. There might have been approval in his voice, or wariness. Hard to tell. After supper, Clara washed dishes while Ethan sat by the fire, cleaning his rifle. The domesticity of it felt surreal. This morning she'd been Clara Bennett, unwanted daughter. Now she was Clara Cole, wife to a stranger, washing dishes in a cabin surrounded by howling wilderness. You should know, Ethan said suddenly. I don't expect, that is, you'll have the bed. I'll take the floor by the fire. Clara's hand stilled in the wash water. Oh, until you're ready. If you're ever ready. He kept his eyes on the rifle. I didn't buy a wife for that. I bought a wife because the territorial governor's making new laws. Single men can't hold land claims much longer. Need a family, they say, to prove you're civilizing the territory. Clara turned slowly. So I'm just a legal convenience. Your protection. For the land, the house. He finally looked at her. In return, you get a home, food, safety. I won't raise a hand to you. Won't force you to anything. That's more than most wives can say. It was. Clara realized. She thought of her mother, nursing bruises behind closed doors, of Mrs. Morrison, who everyone knew Big Jack treated worse than his horses. Ethan was offering her a business arrangement. Nothing more. All right, she said quietly. They spent the rest of the evening in careful coexistence. Ethan showed her where things were kept, explained the daily routines. Clara noticed he was particular about organization, everything had its place, and returned there without fail. As the storm intensified, he made up a pallet by the fire with military precision. Clara retreated to the bedroom, closing the door softly behind her. The bed was larger than any she'd slept in, the quilt hand-stitched in a wedding ring pattern. Someone had made this with love, though she doubted it was Ethan. She changed into her nightgown, shivering in the cold air. Through the door, she could hear Ethan moving around, banking the fire, checking locks one final time. Then silence except for the storm. Clara lay in the strange bed, pulling the quilt to her chin. The pillow smelled of pine and something else, man, she supposed. Her husband's scent. The thought made her stomach flutter oddly. Through the small window, She could see nothing but swirling white. They were cut off from the world completely, trapped in this small shelter while nature raged outside. With her father, storms had meant tension, wondering if his mood would match the weather. Here, she felt safe. A sound made her tense, scratching at the walls, followed by a long, mournful howl. "Just wolves." Ethan's voice came through the door. "They won't bother us." "Wolves? Of course there were wolves." Clara closed her eyes, trying to process everything. This morning, she'd been sold. Tonight she lay in a stranger's bed while he slept by the fire to preserve her dignity. He read books and carved wolves and built water systems that wouldn't freeze. He'd killed in the war, everyone said so, but his hands had been gentle, helping her from her horse. Nothing about Ethan Cole fit together properly, like a puzzle with mismatched pieces. Another howl, closer this time. Clara pulled the quilt higher. Tomorrow she'd have to figure out how to be a wife to this contradiction of a man. Tonight, she just had to survive the strangeness. The storm raged on, but the little cabin held firm against it. Somewhere beyond the bedroom door, her husband kept watch. And despite everything, the forced marriage, the isolation, the wolves, Clara found herself sliding towards sleep. Her last coherent thought was of the carved wolf on the shelf, its wooden eyes seeming to watch over her. Wild things protecting wild things. Perhaps, in this untamed place, maybe that's what they all were. The mountain house creaked and settled around her, speaking its own language of wood and stone. Clara Cole closed her eyes and let it sing her to sleep, while outside the Wyoming winter tried its best to devour the world. Asterisk, asterisk, Part 3. Tender Hands, asterisk, asterisk. 3 weeks had passed since Clara arrived at the mountain house. 3 weeks of careful distance, polite exchanges over meals, and learning the rhythms of a life so different from anything she'd known. Ethan rose before dawn each day, tending the horses and checking his trap lines. Clara kept the house, cooked meals from his well-stocked larder, and tried to understand this man who was her husband-in-law, but a stranger in every other way. They'd developed an unspoken routine. He worked outside, she worked inside. They ate together but spoke little. Evenings found him carving by the fire while she read or mended clothes. He still slept on his pallet, though Clara had noticed him rubbing his back some mornings, grimacing when he thought she wasn't looking. The accident happened on a gray Thursday morning. Clara was kneading bread dough when she heard the shout, sharp, pained, utterly unlike Ethan's usual controlled manner. She ran outside without thinking, not even grabbing her shawl. She found him by the woodshed, half sprawled in the snow, his left leg caught in one of his own bear traps. Blood seeped through his pants, staining the white ground crimson. "Stay back," he growled through clenched teeth, but Clara was already kneeling beside him. "Hush!" She examined the trap, a vicious thing with metal teeth biting deep into his calf. "Tell me how to open it." "Clara, tell me." She met his eyes steadily. "Unless you'd prefer to bleed to death for the sake of your pride." Despite the pain, something like amusement flickered in his gray eyes. "Press down on both springs. Same time. Take strength." Clara positioned herself, gripping the cold metal. The springs were stiff, resistant, but she thought of her mother wringing wet laundry, of all the butter she'd churned, the water she'd hauled. Farm women weren't weaklings. "On 3, she said. 1, 2. She threw all her weight down. The trap opened just enough for Ethan to jerk his leg free with a strangled curse. Clara let go, and the trap snapped shut on empty air. "Inside," she ordered. "Now." For once, he didn't argue. Leaning heavily on her shoulder, he hobbled to the house, leaving a trail of red drops on the porch. Clara helped him to a chair by the fire, then knelt to examine the wound. "Pants need to come off," she said matter-of-factly. Ethan's face, already pale from pain, flushed slightly. I can tend it myself. With what, your teeth? Clara was already fetching hot water and clean cloths. I've doctored injured animals since I was 10. You're just a larger, more stubborn version. That's supposed to make me feel better? It's supposed to make you stop arguing. She set her supplies on the table. Now, are you removing those pants, or am I cutting them off? They're ruined anyway. Muttering under his breath, Ethan fumbled with his belt. Clara turned her back, busying herself with preparing bandages until she heard him sink back in the chair with a pained sigh. The wound was ugly, but not as bad as she'd feared. The trap had caught him at an angle, tearing flesh but missing the major vessels. Still, it needed cleaning and stitching. This will hurt, she warned, dipping a cloth in the hot water mixed with the whiskey Ethan kept for medicinal purposes. Can't be worse than... His words cut off in a hiss as she began cleaning the wound. Clara worked with steady hands, trying not to think about how vulnerable he looked. This man who'd survived war and wilderness, brought low by his own trap. His leg was corded with muscle, crisscrossed with old scars that told their own stories. Hold still, she murmured when he tensed. Almost done with the cleaning. Your hands... His voice was rough, wondering. They're soft. Clara glanced up. He was watching her with an expression she'd never seen before, something raw and unguarded. Is that what you wanted? The question came out more bitter than she intended. A gentle bride with tender hands. That's what I asked for. His jaw tightened as she threaded a needle for the stitching. Didn't expect to get it? Clara began to stitch, making neat, small sutures like her mother had taught her. Ethan barely flinched, though she could see the tension in his white knuckles gripping the chair arms. Why? She asked quietly. Why ask for something you didn't expect? He was silent so long she thought he wouldn't answer. Then, man gets tired of hardness. Everything out here is hard, the ground, the winter, the living. Thought maybe... He trailed off. Thought maybe what? Thought maybe soft hands could make a hard life bearable. Clara's needle paused. She looked up to find him watching her with those storm-gray eyes, and something shifted in the air between them. The careful distance they'd maintained cracked like spring ice. They promised me a gentle bride, he continued, his voice low and rough. But your tender hands, they're driving me wild with endless desire to be more than I am, to be worth such care. Heat bloomed in Clara's cheeks. She forced herself to continue stitching, to keep her hands steady despite the tremor running through her. You are worth care, she said softly. Any man who reads Shelley and carves wolves with such patience is worth care. You don't know what I've done. No, she agreed. But I know what you do now. You could have taken me that first night law and custom would support you. You could beat me like my father did my mother. You could treat me as property, bought and paid for. Instead, you sleep on the floor and ask nothing of me but housework. That makes me decent. That makes you better than most. She tied off the last stitch and began wrapping his leg with clean bandages. Her hands were gentle but sure, and she felt him shiver when her fingers brushed his skin. There, she said, sitting back on her heels. Keep it clean and dry. No trap checking for at least a week. Yes, ma'am. There was wry humor in his tone now. Anything else? Yes. Clara stood, suddenly aware of the impropriety of the situation, her kneeling before a half-dressed man, even if he was her husband. You'll take the bed tonight. That floor's too hard for healing. Clara, those are my terms. She began gathering the bloody cloths. Unless you'd prefer infection and fever. He caught her wrist as she passed, his thumb finding her pulse point. Why do you care? Clara looked down at him, this dangerous man made vulnerable by his own trap and her tender ministrations. Because you're my husband, she said simply, and because you cared enough to ask for gentleness, even if you didn't believe you'd find it. He released her slowly, his fingers trailing across her palm. The touch sent sparks up her arm. That night, for the first time, Ethan slept in the bed while Clara took the rocking chair by the fire, wrapped in quilts. She dozed fitfully, waking often to check on him. Once, in the deep hours before dawn, she found him fever-bright and restless, muttering words she couldn't understand. She fetched cool water and bathed his face, his neck, the strong column of his throat. His eyes opened, unfocused. "Clara." His hand found hers. "Don't leave." "I'm here," she soothed. "Rest now." He pulled her hand to his chest, holding it there over his heart. She could feel its steady beat through his shirt, strong and sure. Gradually, his breathing deepened and the fever flush faded. Clara stayed there, perched on the edge of the bed, her hand trapped beneath his, in the firelight. His face lost its guarded hardness. He looked younger, almost vulnerable. She could see the boy he might have been before war and wilderness carved their marks on him. When dawn came, the fever had broken. Ethan woke to find Clara asleep beside him, still sitting upright. Her hand still caught in his. He studied her face, the determined chin, the faint freckles across her nose, the way her lashes cast shadows on her cheeks. Soft hands. He'd asked for them without believing they existed. But here she was, this woman who should hate him for buying her, who instead tended his wounds with infinite care. Clara stirred, her green eyes opening to find him watching her. For a moment, neither moved. Then she gently extracted her hand. "Your fever broke," she said unnecessarily. "Thanks to you." She stood, smoothing her skirts. "I'll make breakfast." "Clara?" She paused at the door. "The bed's big enough for two. No need for chairs and floors anymore." Color rose in her cheeks, but she nodded. "All right." It was permission and invitation both, not for intimacy. Not yet, but for the possibility of it. For the first time since that hasty wedding, they were choosing each other in some small way. As Clara prepared breakfast, she was acutely aware of Ethan watching from the bed. Something had shifted with her tender care of his wounds. The careful distance was dissolving, replaced by something warmer, more dangerous. Her tender hands had indeed driven him wild with desire, not just physical, but a deeper longing for connection, for the softness he'd convinced himself he didn't deserve. And Clara found herself wanting to give it to him, this gentle touch he'd paid for but never demanded. The carved wolf on the bedroom shelf seemed to watch it all with knowing wooden eyes. Wild things learning to be tender. Perhaps that's what they both were now. Outside, the winter sun broke through the clouds, painting the snow-covered mountains in shades of gold and rose. Inside the little cabin, two damaged souls moved carefully towards something that might, someday, be called love. Asterisk, asterisk, Part 4. Stormwind and Trial by Fire, asterisk, asterisk. The blizzard struck without mercy 3 days after Ethan's leg had healed enough for him to limp about. Clara had noticed the signs, the way the horses grew restless, how the birds fell silent, the peculiar heaviness in the air. But nothing could have prepared her for the fury that descended upon their mountain refuge. It began with wind that howled like a living thing, clawing at the walls and sending shutters banging. Then came the snow, not in gentle flakes, but in horizontal sheets that turned the world white and blind. Within hours, drifts piled against the door, and the temperature plummeted until even the water in the wash basin grew a skin of ice. "This one's going to last," Ethan said, peering through the frosted window. His leg was still tender, but he moved with determined purpose, securing everything that could be secured. Maybe 3 days, maybe more. Clara helped him bring in armload after armload of firewood, stacking it high against the inner wall. They filled every available container with water before the pump froze. The root cellar was already well stocked, but Ethan insisted on bringing up extra supplies. "Never hurts to prepare for the worst," he said, and something in his eyes told Clara he'd learned that lesson hard. By nightfall, they were truly trapped, Snow blocked the door completely, and the windows showed nothing but swirling white. The little cabin creaked and groaned under the assault, but held firm, a testament to Ethan's careful construction. They settled by the fire after a simple supper, the storm's fury making conversation difficult. Clara picked up her mending while Ethan worked on a new carving, a bird this time. Wings spread in flight. The domesticity of it felt strange and precious, as if the storm had carved out a separate world just for them. "My mother used to say storms were God's way of making folks slow down," Clara said, raising her voice over the wind. "Force them to stop working and just be—" "Smart woman," Ethan replied, his knife moving in steady strokes. "What happened to her?" "Pneumonia. Winter of '68. Clara's needle paused. Pa wasn't the same after. That's when the drinking got worse. The gambling started, like he was angry at her for leaving. Loss does that to some men. Turns them mean. What does it do to others?" Ethan was quiet for a long moment. "Turns them into ghosts, walking around but not really living." Clara set down her mending. "Is that what happened to you in the war?" His hands stilled on the carving. She'd never asked directly about his past, respecting the unspoken boundary, but something about the storm's isolation made honesty feel necessary. "Wasn't the war that did it," he said finally. "It was after—" He set the half-formed bird aside and stared into the fire. Clara waited, patient as the mountains themselves. "I had a wife before." The words came out rough, unused. "Sarah. Met her in Missouri after mustering out. She had yellow hair and a laugh like church bells. We had a little farm, nothing fancy, a son, James. He was 3. Clara's heart constricted. Was, past tense like a death knell. Bushwhackers came through in '69, remnants from the war who wouldn't quit fighting. I was in town getting supplies." His voice went flat, emotionless. "By the time I got back, the house was burning. They were already gone." "Oh, Ethan." Clara moved without thinking, kneeling beside his chair and taking his scarred hands in hers. "I'm so sorry. I hunted them down." He looked at her then, and his eyes were terrible in their emptiness. "Every last one. Took me 6 months. But I found them all. After that, couldn't stay in Missouri. Couldn't stay anywhere with people. Came out here where the only thing to fight was the mountain itself." Clara held his hands tighter, feeling the weight of his confession. "That's why you wanted a wife who wouldn't make you feel." "Thought I was done with feeling anything." His thumb traced her knuckles. "Then you came along with your soft hands and fierce eyes, tending my wounds and defending my books and making this place feel like Like what?" "Like home again, like maybe I could be more than just a ghost." The wind shrieked around the cabin, but inside, a different kind of storm was building. Clara rose up on her knees, bringing their faces level. You're the man who builds furniture and reads poetry, who paid too much for a bride he wouldn't touch without permission, who sleeps on hard floors rather than frighten a stranger." "Clara." Her name was a warning and a plea. She silenced him by pressing her lips to his soft, tentative, a question more than a demand, for a heartbeat. He went absolutely still. Then his hands came up to frame her face, and he kissed her back with a hunger that spoke of years of loneliness. When they broke apart, both breathing hard, Clara saw the conflict in his eyes. Want warring with fear, desire with honor. "I won't be her," she said softly. "I won't be Sarah, but I'm here. Ethan, I'm real and I'm here." "I know." He traced her cheekbone with one calloused thumb. "That's what terrifies me." That night, they shared the bed as they had since his injury, but everything felt different. They lay carefully apart, yet Clara was intensely aware of every breath he took, every shift of his weight. The storm raged on, sealing them in their private world. Sometime in the deepest part of night, Clara woke to find Ethan thrashing beside her, caught in the grip of nightmare. He muttered broken words, names, perhaps, or prayers. Without hesitation, she gathered him against her, stroking his hair and murmuring soothing nonsense until the tremors passed. He woke with a gasp, disoriented. "Clara!" "I'm here. You're safe. We're both safe." He buried his face in her shoulder, and she felt moisture that might have been tears. They held each other as the storm battered the walls, two survivors clinging together in the darkness. Morning brought no relief from the blizzard. If anything, it seemed worse. They couldn't see past the windows now snow had drifted that high. The cabin felt like a ship in a white sea, creaking and swaying with each gust. They fell into a rhythm of survival, keeping the fire fed, melting snow for water when their stores ran low, reading to each other from Ethan's precious books. Clara discovered he had a good voice for Shakespeare, making the old words live with passion. "You should have been an actor," she teased after a particularly dramatic rendition of Hamlet's soliloquy. "Tried it once," he admitted with a rare smile. "In camp during the war, played Juliet in a soldier's production. The things men do for entertainment when there's no women around." Clara laughed until her sides ached, imagining stern Ethan in makeshift skirts. It was the first time she'd heard him joke about the war, and it felt like progress. On the third night, the storm finally began to exhaust itself. The wind dropped from a shriek to a moan, and gaps appeared in the snow clouds, showing stars like chips of ice. They were down to their last candle, sitting close together on the bed, when Clara asked, "What happens when spring comes?" "Snow melts, rivers run high, bears wake up hungry." "That's not what I meant," he sighed. "I know." He took her hand, studying it in the flickering light. "What do you want to happen?" "I want to plant a garden," Clara said. "Flowers and vegetables both. I want to learn to shoot so I'm not helpless if trouble comes. I want to read every book on that shelf and maybe order more from town. I want—" She paused, gathering courage. "I want to be your wife. Really your wife. Not because you bought me or because the law says so, but because we choose it." Ethan turned her hand over, tracing the lines on her palm as if they held answers. "I'm not an easy man to live with. I have dark moods, nightmares, days when I can't stand to be around anyone, not even myself. I'm not always easy either. I'm stubborn and sharp-tongued, and I've been known to burn biscuits when I'm distracted by a book." "Clara!" He looked up at her, and his eyes held something that might have been hope. "I think I could love you. Think maybe I already do. But I'm scared of what that means. Last time I loved—" "I know." She cupped his face with her free hand. "But that was then. This is now. We're different people in a different place. Maybe that's enough to make a different ending." He kissed her then, deep and sure. And this time there was no hesitation. When the candle finally guttered out, they were no longer two separate people maintaining careful distance. They were husband and wife, choosing each other in the darkness while the last of the storm whispered against the walls. In the morning, they would dig out. They would face the world remade by blizzard, all familiar landmarks erased. But they would face it together, no longer ghosts, but living souls who had found each other in the wilderness. The trial by fire had become a trial by ice, and they had emerged not unscathed, but unified. Whatever came next, spring floods or summer droughts or the judgment of distant towns, they would meet it as one. The storm had trapped them, but in that trap, they had found freedom. The freedom to choose love over fear, connection over isolation, a future over the past. As dawn broke over the mountains, painting the new snow in shades of rose and gold, Clara and Ethan Cole slept entwined, their breathing synchronized like a prayer for all the mornings yet to come. Asterisk, asterisk, Part 5. Ghosts from the past, asterisk, asterisk. Spring had finally conquered winter's grip on the mountains. Snow melted in rushing streams, and the first brave wildflowers pushed through the thawing earth. Clara knelt in her new garden plot, hands deep in the dark soil, planting seeds that promised summer abundance. 3 months of marriage had transformed the lonely mountain cabin into something that truly felt like home. She was humming an old hymn when the sound of approaching horses made her freeze. Multiple horses, not the single rider they occasionally saw passing through. Ethan emerged from the barn, rifle in hand but held casually, watching the trail. 4 men rode into view, and Clara's blood turned to ice. Leading them was her father, Samuel Bennett, looking rougher than she remembered. Beside him rode Big Jack Morrison, scarred, dangerous, wearing his guns like old friends. 2 other men she didn't recognize flanked them, hard-faced individuals who had the look of hired trouble. "Well, well," Samuel called out, reining in his horse just outside the fence. "There's my wayward daughter. Playing house. Are we—" Clara stood slowly, brushing soil from her hands. Ethan moved closer, positioning himself slightly in front of her. "Bennett," Ethan's voice was calm, cold. "You're not welcome here." "Not very neighborly of you, Cole." Samuel's smile was ugly. "Especially considering you kidnapped my daughter." "Kidnapped?" Clara stepped around Ethan, fury overcoming fear. "You sold me $200. Remember?" "Now, Clara girl, that's not how I remember it." Samuel's bloodshot eyes narrowed. "Way I recall. You disappeared in the night. This man here took advantage of a young woman's confusion, forced her to go through some sham marriage." Big Jack Morrison spoke for the first time, his voice like gravel. "Folks in town are mighty concerned. Young woman held against her will up here in the wilderness. Some say Cole's got her under some kind of spell. Mountain madness, they're calling it." "That's a lie," Clara said firmly. "Is it?" Samuel dismounted, approaching the fence. "Then why haven't you come to town once in 3 months? Why does no one see you at church or market? A dutiful wife would show herself, prove she's well." Clara felt Ethan tense beside her. They hadn't gone to town because he knew how people looked at him, the killer, the hermit, the man who bought a bride. She hadn't minded the isolation, had treasured their private world, but now that privacy was being twisted into something sinister. "I've been busy," she said. "Making a home, that's what wives do." "Helping with the spring planting, from the looks of it." One of the unnamed men sneered. "Working like a field hand. That how he treats you, like a slave?" "I work my own land by choice," Clara snapped. "Your land." Big Jack laughed. "Women don't own land, little girl. Everything here belongs to Cole, including you." "Get off my property." Ethan's voice had dropped to a dangerous whisper. "Now." "Or what?" Samuel spread his hands. "You'll shoot us 4 witnesses to say you murdered innocent men come to check on a potentially kidnapped woman. That'll look real good to the territorial judge." Clara saw the trap. They'd come prepared with a story, witnesses, the weight of social expectation. A young woman isolated with a dangerous man, it did look suspicious to those inclined to think ill of Ethan. "I'll come to town," she said suddenly. "Tomorrow, I'll speak to anyone who wants to hear that I'm here of my own free will." "Tomorrow." Big Jack shook his head. "That gives Cole all night to threaten you, beat the right words into you. No, if you're really free, you'll come now. Prove to everyone you can leave when you want." "She's not going anywhere with you," Ethan said flatly. "See?" Samuel turned to his companions. "Won't let her leave. What more proof do we need?" Clara's mind raced. If she refused to go, it would confirm their accusations. If she went, she'd be at their mercy, and she had no illusions about her father's real motives. This wasn't about her welfare, it was about money. Somehow, it was always about money with Samuel Bennett. "I'll go," she said, feeling Ethan stiffen beside her. "But on my horse, not yours. And I'll speak my piece in front of the whole town, not just to you 4. Samuel's face darkened. This wasn't going according to his plan. "Now, girl." "Those are my terms." Clara interrupted. "Unless you'd prefer, I write to the territorial governor myself. Explain how my father sold me to pay gambling debts, then came back wanting more money." You threatening me? I'm offering to come peacefully and speak the truth. That's what you want. Isn't it the truth? The men exchanged glances. Big Jack nodded slowly. Fair enough. Get your horse. Ethan caught her arm as she turned. Clara, no. She met his storm-gray eyes, trying to convey everything she couldn't say aloud. Trust me, I'll come back. This is the only way. I need to do this, she said softly, or they'll never leave us in peace. Something passed over his face, pain, fear, resignation. He released her arm. I'm coming with you. No, Samuel's hand went to his gun. Cole stays here. This is between family. I'm her family now, Ethan said evenly. That's what we aim to dispute. Big Jack said, she comes alone, or we take this to the law. Your choice. Cole, let her prove she's free, or we'll prove she isn't. Clara saddled Rosebud with steady hands, though her heart hammered against her ribs. She tucked her mother's Bible into her saddlebag, a talisman against whatever waited in town. Ethan stood rigid by the fence as she mounted. Clara, I'll be back by nightfall, she said, loud enough for the others to hear. Then, softer, I promise. The ride to town felt like a funeral procession. Her father and his men boxed her in, preventing any thought of escape. Not that she would run, that would only make things worse for Ethan. The settlement looked smaller than she remembered, meaner somehow. Word had already spread of their arrival. People emerged from shops and houses, watching with avid curiosity as Clara was herded toward the saloon that served as an informal courthouse. Inside, a crowd had gathered. Clara recognized many faces: Mrs. Henderson from the general store, Preacher Williams, the banker Mr. Frost. And there, at a table in the center, sat Mayor Jameson, a thin man who owed his position to Big Jack's influence. Miss Bennett, excuse me, Mrs. Cole. The mayor began, his reedy voice carrying poorly in the smoky room. Some serious allegations have been made about your situation. Clara stood straight, chin high. I'm aware. May I address them? That's why we're here. Clara looked around the room, meeting as many eyes as she could. 3 months ago, my father sold me to Ethan Cole for $200 to pay his gambling debts to Mr. Morrison here. This is fact. Preacher Williams performed the ceremony. He can attest it was legal. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. The preacher squirmed, but nodded reluctantly. Since then, Clara continued, I have lived as Mr. Cole's wife by my own choice. He has never harmed me, never forced me to anything. If I have not come to town, it's because I've been busy making a home, as any new wife would be. She's been bewitched, someone called out. Cole's got Indian magic or some such. The only magic in that house is running water that doesn't freeze and a man who reads Shakespeare, Clara said dryly. Hardly the stuff of dark sorcery. Then why didn't he come with you? Big Jack asked, his scarred face skeptical. If everything's proper, because you threatened to shoot him if he did, Clara shot back. 4 armed men against 1, those aren't odds that favor truth-telling. Watch your tongue, girl, Samuel growled. Show some respect. Respect, Clara turned on her father. Like the respect you showed when you sold me, like the respect you showed my mother with your fists. That's enough. Mayor Jameson interrupted. The question is whether you're being held against your will. I am not, Clara said firmly. I choose to stay with my husband. Now, may I go home? Not so fast. Big Jack stood. There's the matter of the debt. Clara's stomach dropped. Here it was, the real reason. What debt? She asked, though she suspected the answer. Your father owes me another $300. Dice haven't been kind to him lately. Big Jack's smile was predatory. Now, seeing as you're Cole's property, legally speaking, seems to me your husband inherits your father's debts. That's not how law works. Clara protested. Out here, law works how I say it works. Big Jack replied. Unless Cole wants to pay up. I might have to collect in other ways. Maybe take that pretty little mare you rode in on. Maybe take something else. The threat hung heavy in the smoky air. Clara understood now. This whole charade had been about money getting Ethan to pay or giving them excuse to take what was his. I need to speak with my husband, Clara said quietly. Tomorrow noon. Big Jack said. He brings $300 to clear the family debt, or we come collecting, and if you're not with him, if you've run off or he's hidden you, we'll know you were lying about being free. Clara left the saloon feeling dirty, contaminated by their greed and manipulation. The ride back felt longer, heavier. The sun was setting as she crested the final ridge and saw the cabin below, warm light spilling from its windows. Ethan was on the porch before she'd even reached the gate. He helped her down, his hands checking her for harm. What happened? Clara told him everything, watching his face darken with each word. $300, he said when she finished. They want money. It was always about money. Clara slumped against him. What do we do? Ethan was quiet for a long moment. We pay. What, Ethan? No, it's extortion. It's the price of peace. He cupped her face. I've got the money. Gold cashed from my hunting. If $300 makes them go away, it's worth it. They'll just come back. Next time it'll be 500, then 1,000. Maybe, or maybe they'll find someone else to bleed. He pulled her close. I thought I'd lost you today. When you rode off with them, I can't do that again. Clara, can't lose another. She silenced him with a kiss. You won't lose me. We'll face them together tomorrow. Show the whole town that I stand with you by choice. That night, they held each other fierce and desperate, as if trying to merge into one being that couldn't be separated by law or greed or social judgment. Clara traced the scars on his body, each one a story of survival. He worshipped her with hands and mouth, murmuring promises against her skin. When dawn broke, they dressed carefully. Clara in her best dress, Ethan in his town clothes. They saddled their horses and rode out side by side, the gold heavy in Ethan's saddlebags. Whatever waited in town payment or violence or some new scheme, they would meet it as one. The ghosts of the past had come calling, but Clara and Ethan had built something stronger than fear. They had built a love worth fighting for. Asterisk, asterisk, Part 6. The Curse of Mountain and Heart. Asterisk, asterisk. The payment had been made. $300 in gold had changed hands in the dusty street while half the town watched. But as Clara feared, it hadn't brought peace. Instead, whispers followed them everywhere about the mountain hermit and his bewitched bride, about unnatural things happening since their union. It started small. Tom Henderson's milk cow went dry. The widow Morrison's chickens stopped laying. Then came worse, a fire in the church's storage shed, and young Billy Parsons vanishing while hunting in the woods. Each incident, no matter how unconnected, was laid at Clara's feet. It's her. Clara heard Mrs. Henderson hiss to another woman at the general store. Ever since she went up that mountain, took up with that killer, things have gone wrong. She's cursed, mark my words. Clara kept her head high, purchased her supplies, and left without a word. But the accusations ate at her. By the time she reached home, she was shaking with suppressed rage and something else doubt. Ethan noticed immediately. What happened? Nothing new, Clara said, unpacking flour and salt. Just more talk. He caught her hand. Clara, tell me. She met his eyes. They're saying I'm cursed, that I've brought bad fortune to the town. Her voice cracked. What if they're right? What if? Stop. Ethan pulled her against him. You're the best thing that's happened to this mountain. To me. Don't let their poison seep in. But the poison was already working. That night, Clara dreamed of fire and missing children, of accusing eyes and pointing fingers. She woke gasping and found Ethan already awake, watching her with concern. "Maybe I should go back," she whispered into the darkness. "Leave before—" "Before what?" His voice was sharp. "Before they decide to burn you as a witch, before your father sells you to someone else." He sat up, running a hand through his hair. "You're not going anywhere." "But the town can hang. They've hated me for years, and now they hate you for choosing me. That's their problem, not ours." But it became their problem 3 days later when riders appeared at their gate, not her father this time, but a group of townsmen led by Herbert Cranston, the self-appointed moral guardian of the settlement. "Mrs. Cole," Cranston called out, his thin face pinched with disapproval. "We need to speak with you." Clara stepped onto the porch, Ethan beside her. "Speak then." "Billy Parsons is still missing. 3 days now. His mother's beside herself." Cranston's pale eyes bored into her. "Some folks remember you were picking herbs near where he disappeared." "I pick herbs all over the mountain," Clara said evenly, "for cooking and medicine." "Witches' work," someone muttered. "Healing work," Clara corrected. "The same remedies your grandmothers used." "Our grandmothers didn't consort with killers," Cranston snapped. "Didn't bring curses down on God-fearing people." Ethan stepped forward. "You need to leave, now!" "Or what? Cole, you'll add to your body count." Cranston sneered. "We know what you did after the war. How many men you hunted down. Blood on your hands calls to blood. And now your wife." "Enough." Clara moved in front of Ethan, feeling the tension radiating from him. "You want someone to blame for your troubles. I understand that, but I haven't cursed anyone. I'm just a woman trying to live in peace." "Peace, Mrs." Cranston pushed forward, her face twisted with grief. "My nephew is missing. There's been no peace since you came to that man's bed." "Then find your nephew instead of wasting time here," Clara said. "Have you searched the old mine shaft, the cave system near Bitter Creek, or are you too busy looking for witches to do actual searching?" The group shifted uneasily. Clara pressed on. "I'll help search, so will Ethan, but stop this foolishness about curses before—" A howl cut through the air, long and mournful. Then another, and another. The horses began to panic, and the townspeople looked around wildly as gray shapes emerged from the forest. Wolves. A full pack, more than Clara had ever seen at once. They didn't attack. They simply appeared, surrounding the property like ghostly sentinels, their yellow eyes fixed on the intruders with unblinking intensity. "Dear God," someone whispered. "She commands them." "Don't be ridiculous," Clara said, though her heart was racing. The wolves had never come so close. So many. "It's a sign." Cranston backed toward his horse. "You're marked by darkness. Clara Cole, both of you are." The group fled in disorder, spurring their horses hard down the trail. The wolves watched them go, then melted back into the forest as silently as they'd come. Only one remained, the large gray male Clara had noticed before. It stared at her for a long moment before turning and padding away. "Well," Ethan said dryly, "that won't help our reputation any—" Clara laughed, but it had a hysterical edge. "Did I do that? Did I somehow—" "No." Ethan gripped her shoulders. "Wolves are territorial. They probably didn't like strangers threatening their space. Nothing more." But that night, Clara couldn't shake the feeling that something had shifted. The mountains felt different, watchful. When she went to draw water, ravens gathered in unusual numbers. When she worked in the garden, she found wolf tracks circling the house. The next morning brought terrible news. A rider came at dawn. Billy Parsons had been found, alive, thankfully, but with a strange story. He'd fallen into an old mine shaft, just as Clara had suggested they search. But he claimed someone had pushed him, though he couldn't say who. And while trapped, he said wolves had come. dropping rabbits down the shaft for him to eat raw. Impossible. The rider, young Deputy Collins, said, "But the boy swears it's true, and there were wolf tracks everywhere around that shaft." Clara felt cold. Is he all right? He'll mend, but folks are spooked. Some are talking about trials, like they did back east. Collins looked uncomfortable. "Sheriff wanted me to warn you. Might be best if you and Cole stayed away from town for a while." After he left, Clara sank into a chair. "They think I'm a witch." "Let them think it," Ethan said grimly. "If fear keeps them away, so much the better." But Clara couldn't dismiss it so easily. Strange things were happening. The wolves' behavior, the ravens, even her garden seemed to grow with unusual vigor. And deep in her heart, she wondered if somehow her anger, her desire to protect this life she'd built, had awakened something in the wild mountains. 2 nights later, she woke to find the bed empty. Ethan stood by the window, rifle in hand. "What is it?" "Torches, coming up the trail." Clara's blood ran cold. She'd read about mob justice, about what fear could drive people to do. She dressed quickly, hands shaking. "The root cellar," Ethan said. "You can hide there." "I'm not hiding. This is my home." Clara, no. She picked up the shotgun he'd taught her to use. We faced them together, or not at all. The mob that arrived was smaller than she'd feared, but larger than she'd hoped. Maybe 15 people. Faces twisted by torchlight and righteousness. Cranston led them, of course, with several other townsmen and even some women. "Ethan, Cole, Clara, Cole," Cranston shouted. "Come out and face judgment." They stepped onto the porch, weapons visible but not raised. The sight of Clara armed seemed to inflame the crowd further. "See how she stands with him?" someone called. "Corrupted, cursed." "The only curse here is ignorance," Clara said clearly. "And fear making you into fools." "Silence. Witch, Mrs." Cranston shrieked. "You saved my nephew only to make yourself look innocent, but we know the truth." Clara saw the madness in their eyes and knew words wouldn't reach them. They'd come for blood, for someone to blame for all of life's unfairness. She and Ethan were perfect targets, outsiders. Different, defiant. Then the wolves came again. They flowed out of the darkness like gray ghosts, dozens of them. The mob's horses screamed and reared. Some people fled immediately. Others huddled together, torches wavering. The pack formed a line between the cabin and the mob. Hackles raised. Lips pulled back to show impressive fangs. The message was clear no further. "You see," Cranston's voice cracked. "She commands the beasts. It's unholy." Clara stepped forward, past Ethan's restraining hand, past the porch edge. The wolves parted for her, and she walked among them like a queen among subjects. She felt no fear, only a strange sense of rightness. "Yes," she said, her voice carrying clearly. "They protect me, as the mountains protect me, as the storms and the seasons protect me." She faced the mob, green eyes blazing. "Because I belong here, because I chose love over fear, courage over conformity. If that makes me a witch in your eyes, so be it." She raised her hand, and the largest wolf, the gray male, came to her side. She rested her fingers on his broad head, feeling the wild strength beneath fur and muscle. "Leave," Clara commanded. "Leave and don't come back. Tell your stories. Spread your fears. But know this, I am Clara Cole, wife of the mountain. And I will not be driven from my home by small minds and smaller hearts." The mob broke. They fled in panic, leaving torches sputtering in the dirt. Only Cranston lingered, his face a mask of terror and hatred. "This isn't over," he spat. "The territory will hear of this. Authorities will come." "Let them come," Ethan said, moving to stand beside Clara. "We'll be here." Cranston fled, and the night swallowed him. The wolves remained for a few moments more, then vanished into the forest, all except the gray male, who gave Clara one last golden stare before following his pack. "What just happened?" Clara whispered, suddenly shaking. Ethan wrapped his arms around her. "You happened. You claimed your place, and the mountain recognized it." "That's not possible. It's not rational." "Neither is love," Ethan said softly. "Neither is finding each other across all the odds. Some things just are. Clara, accept the gift." They went inside, barring the door, though they both knew it was unnecessary. The wolves would watch tonight. The mountain itself would stand guard. As Clara lay in Ethan's arms, she thought about curses and blessings, about the thin line between witch and wise woman. She'd been sold like property, but she'd claimed her power. She'd been called cursed, but she'd found her strength. Let them tell their stories in town. Let them whisper about the witch of the mountain and her dark husband. Clara had chosen her truth, and the wild had chosen her in return. The curse wasn't on the town. The blessing was on her fierce and free and finally home. Asterisk, asterisk, Part 7, Night of Confessions, asterisk, asterisk. A month had passed since the night of the wolves. The town kept its distance, their fear finally granting Clara and Ethan the peace they'd craved. Summer bloomed full on the mountain, wild flowers carpeting the meadows in riots of color. Clara's garden thrived, vegetables growing fat and herbs fragrant in the warm air. But the greatest change was in the cabin itself, in the careful dance Clara and Ethan had been performing since that night. They moved around each other with new awareness, touches lingering, glances holding meanings too deep for words. The bed they shared had become a geography of almost touching, almost yielding, almost crossing the final boundary between them. Tonight felt different. Clara sensed it as she prepared supper, watching Ethan through the window as he split wood. The evening light caught the sheen of sweat on his skin, the flecks of muscle beneath his shirt, when he came inside, bringing the scent of pine and honest labor. Their eyes met and held. "Storm coming," he said, but his eyes said something else entirely.
"I know."
Clara's voice came out breathless.
"I can feel it."
They ate in charged silence, the approaching thunder a bass note to their unspoken conversation. When the first lightning flickered across the peaks, Ethan stood abruptly. "Clara, I need to tell you something." She set down her cup carefully. "All right." He paced to the fireplace, back again, running his hand through his dark hair. "That night with the wolves, when you stood there like some ancient queen, claiming your place." He stopped, jaw working. "I realized something." "What did you realize?" "That I've been a coward." He faced her, gray eyes stormy as the sky outside. "I've used my past, my grief, as a wall. Kept you at arm's length because I was terrified of feeling again. But Clara," his voice roughened, "I'm already lost. Have been since you tended my wound with those gentle hands that drove me wild with wanting." Clara's heart hammered against her ribs. "Ethan!" "Let me finish." He knelt before her chair, taking her hands in his. "I love you." "Not as the convenient wife who saved my land claim. Not as the woman I bought to keep house. I love you as Clara, fierce and tender, stubborn and wise, the woman who faces down mobs and befriends wolves, who reads Shakespeare and burns biscuits and makes this cold cabin feel like home." Tears blurred Clara's vision. "I need to tell you something too." He waited, still kneeling, vulnerability naked on his weathered face. "That first night," Clara said softly, "when you gave me the bed and took the floor, I hated you a little. Hated that you could be kind when I needed to despise you for buying me." She touched his face, tracing the scar through his eyebrow. "But then I saw your books, your carvings, the way you built this place with such care, and I realized you weren't the monster I needed you to be." "When did hate become love?" "The night of the blizzard, when you told me about Sarah and James." Her thumb brushed his cheekbone. I saw your wounds, deeper than any trap could make, and I wanted to heal them. Wanted to show you that love didn't always end in ashes. Clara, her name was a prayer on his lips. I love you, Ethan Cole. Not because you bought me or married me or gave me shelter. I love you because you see me, not as property or convenience, but as myself. That's rarer than gold in this world. The storm broke outside, rain hammering the roof, but inside was only the sound of their breathing, the crackle of the fire, the wild beating of two hearts finding their rhythm. Ethan rose, drawing her to her feet. Be sure, he said roughly, because if we cross this line, I'll never let you go. I'm not civilized enough for that. Good, Clara whispered. I don't want civilized. I want real. I want you. He kissed her then, deep and desperate. Months of hunger poured into the connection. Clara met him with equal fervor, her hands fisting in his shirt, pulling him closer. They'd kissed before, careful touches full of question marks. This was different, a declaration, a claiming, a promise. When they broke apart, gasping, Ethan's eyes were almost black. Clara, it's been years since... I might not... She silenced him with a finger to his lips. We have time, all the time we need. The journey to the bedroom was a landscape of discovery. Buttons released with trembling fingers, skin revealed in the lamplight, scars mapped with tender touches. Each moment stretched like honey, sweet and golden and precious. You're so beautiful, Ethan breathed, reverent as a man at prayer. Clara felt no shame, no fear. This wasn't the rough claiming she dreaded on her wedding night. This was communion. Two souls made one in the ancient dance of love. They moved together with careful passion, learning the language of each other's pleasure. Ethan's hands, so strong and work-hardened, were infinitely gentle on her skin. Clara discovered she could make him groan with a touch, could bring him to trembling with her mouth against his throat. When they finally joined, it was with eyes open, names whispered like vows. The storm outside seemed to echo their rhythm, nature itself bearing witness to their union. Clara understood now why this was called becoming one she couldn't tell where she ended, and Ethan began. Afterward, they lay entwined, sweat cooling on their skin, hearts gradually slowing. Ethan traced lazy patterns on Clara's bare shoulder, wonder in his touch. I thought I'd forgotten how to feel this, he murmured. Thought that part of me died with them? It was sleeping, Clara said softly. Waiting to heal, waiting for the right time. Waiting for you. He pressed a kiss to her hair. My wild mountain wife. They talked through the night, sharing secrets in the darkness. Clara told him about her mother's death, how she'd held her hand as fever burned her away, about the years of her father's anger, of dodging fists and cruel words, about the books that saved her, the dreams of something more. Ethan spoke of the war, of boys becoming killers before they could properly grow beards, of finding Sarah, thinking he'd escaped the violence, only to have it follow him home, of the months hunting her killers, becoming the very monster he'd tried to leave behind, of choosing isolation rather than risk caring again. But you can't stop caring, he said. Just bury it deep and hope it stays dead. Then you came along and planted gardens over all my graves. Gardens grow best in rich soil. Clara said, even soil darkened by old pain. They made love again as dawn painted the mountains gold, slower this time, savoring each touch and taste. Clara felt reborn, remade by loving and being loved. The girl sold for $200 was gone. In her place stood a woman who'd claimed her power, her place, her passion. Later, as Ethan slept beside her, Clara rose and wrapped herself in a shawl. She stood by the window, watching the sun burn off the storm's remnants. The world looked washed clean, sparkling with possibility. Movement caught her eye, the wolf pack, passing along the tree line. The gray male paused, looking directly at her window. Clara raised her hand in greeting, and could have sworn the wolf dipped his head in acknowledgement before melting into the forest. "Come back to bed." Ethan's voice was drowsy, content. Clara returned to his arms, fitting against him like she'd always belonged there. "I was just thinking." "Dangerous habit in a woman," he teased, then yelped as she pinched him. "What were you thinking?" "About names. I've been Clara Bennett, sold and bartered. Clara Cole, bought and wed. But I think I'm finally just Clara. Myself. Whole." "And who is Clara?" She considered. "A woman who reads books and plants gardens, who stands with wolves and faces down mobs, who loves a complicated man in a simple house on a wild mountain." She turned in his arms, meeting his eyes. "Is that enough?" "More than enough," Ethan said roughly. "More than I ever dreamed of deserving." "You deserve everything," Clara said firmly. "Joy and peace and a future not haunted by the past. We both do." They sealed the promise with kisses that led to more, the morning disappearing in a haze of discovery and delight. The world beyond their walls, the town's judgment, her father's greed, society's rules faded to insignificance. Here in this cabin, in this bed, in each other's arms, they were creating their own world. By the time they finally rose, the sun was high and birds sang summer songs. Clara made breakfast while Ethan shaved, both moving with new ease in their shared space, when he came up behind her at the stove, wrapping his arms around her waist. She leaned back into him with perfect trust. "No regrets?" he asked softly. "None," Clara said. "Except—" He tensed. Except that we waited so long." She turned in his arms, spatula still in hand. "All those nights sleeping careful distances apart. What a waste." His laughter rumbled through both their bodies. "We'll make up for it." "Promise." "Promise." He sealed it with a kiss that nearly burned the eggs. As they sat down to eat, fingers intertwined across the table, Clara thought about the long journey that had brought them here, from that cold December morning when she'd been sold, through storms and trials, wolves and mobs, to this perfect summer morning where love sat at their table like a welcome guest. They'd confessed their love. Their bodies, their souls, had torn down the walls between them and built something new from the ruins. The night of confessions had become a morning of possibilities, stretching out before them like the mountain valleys wide and wild, and theirs to explore together. "What are you smiling about?" Ethan asked. "Everything," Clara said. "Absolutely everything." And in that moment, with summer light streaming through the windows and her husband's hand warm in hers, everything was exactly what she had. Asterisk, asterisk, part Sade, the mountain's wife, asterisk, asterisk. Spring arrived early that year, painting the Wyoming mountains in shades of emerald and gold. The snow retreated to the highest peaks, leaving meadows carpeted with wildflowers that Clara had never seen before Indian paintbrush, mountain lupine, and delicate columbines that danced in the warm breeze. Clara knelt in her expanded garden, planting the first seeds of the season. Her hands worked the rich soil with practiced ease, no longer the soft hands of a town girl, but strong and capable, marked by small scars from thorns and tools. She paused to brush a strand of hair from her face, leaving a smudge of dirt on her cheek, and smiled at the simple pleasure of it. "You're out here early." Ethan's voice came from behind her. She turned to find him watching from the porch, coffee mug in hand, that soft look in his eyes that still made her heart skip after all these months. "The moon was right for planting," she said, "and the seeds were calling to me." He chuckled. Speaking to plants now, the town folk would have a field day with that. "Let them talk." Clara stood, brushing dirt from her skirts. "They've left us alone all winter. Maybe they've finally accepted that we're here to stay." It was true. After the night of the wolves, the harassment had gradually ceased. Deputy Collins had ridden up once in February to check on them officially. he said, though Clara suspected it was more curiosity than duty. He'd found them thriving, the cabin warm and welcoming. Clara obviously there of her own free will. His report back to town must have satisfied the authorities, because no one else had come. "I have something for you," Ethan said, setting down his coffee. Clara followed him inside, where he retrieved a small wooden box from the mantel. She recognized his handiwork in the careful joints, the smooth finish that spoke of hours of patient labor. "Open it," he urged, boyish excitement breaking through his usual reserve. Inside, nestled on a bed of blue calico, lay a silver ring. Not just any ring. Clara gasped as she recognized it. Her mother's wedding band, the one she'd kept in her treasured box, now polished and paired with a matching band. "How did you—" "I've been working on it all winter," Ethan said. "Took your mother's ring to that traveling silversmith when he passed through. Had him make a matching one for me and resize yours proper. Figured we should do this right." Clara's eyes filled with tears as he took the rings from the box. He slipped hers onto her finger, a perfect fit now, then held out his hand for her to do the same. "I know we're already married in law," he said softly, "but I wanted to marry you in truth. No money changing hands, no debts or obligations, just us, choosing each other." "Yes," Clara whispered, sliding the ring onto his finger. "Forever yes." He cupped her face in his hands. "Clara Cole, mountain woman, wolf friend, garden witch, keeper of my heart, I take you as my wife. Not because anyone promised me anything, not for gentle hands or quiet ways, but because you're fierce and true and mine." "Ethan Cole," Clara replied, her voice strong despite the tears. "Hunter, protector, reader of poetry, builder of dreams, I take you as my husband. Not because I was sold or told, but because I choose you, completely and forever." They sealed it with a kiss that tasted of promises and coffee, and the sweet morning air drifting through the open door. When they pulled apart, both were crying and laughing at once. "Now I'm truly your wife," Clara said, "the mountain's wife." "Speaking of which," Ethan pulled her toward the door. "Come with me. There's something else." He led her up the familiar trail behind the cabin, but instead of stopping at their usual overlook, he continued higher. The path was newer here, recently cleared. Clara realized he must have been working on it during those times he disappeared for hours, claiming to be checking trap lines. They emerged onto a plateau she'd never seen before. The view stole her breath, the entire valley spread below. Their cabin a tiny square amid the vast wilderness. Mountains marched to every horizon, snow-capped and eternal, and there, built into a natural shelter of rock, stood a small bench for watching sunsets, Ethan explained, or storms, or just for being above it all when the world feels too close. Clara sank onto the bench, overwhelmed. From here, she could see the thread of smoke from their chimney, the green square of her garden, the horses grazing in their meadow, their whole life laid out like a map of contentment. "It's perfect," she breathed. Ethan sat beside her, taking her hand. "This is what I wanted to give you from the start. Not just shelter, but a kingdom. You're queen of all you survey. Clara Cole." They sat in comfortable silence, watching eagles circle on the thermals. Then Clara spotted movement below the wolf pack, crossing the meadow in single file. The gray male paused, looking up as if he knew they were watching. "Our guardians," Clara murmured. "Or maybe just neighbors," Ethan said, "living their lives alongside ours." It was a good way to think of it. Not magic or mysticism, but simple coexistence, the wild accepting them as part of the mountain's ecology. As the sun climbed higher, they made their way back down. There was work to do. There was always work in this life they'd chosen. But it was good work, shared work, building something that would last. That afternoon, while Ethan repaired the chicken coop, Clara heard horses approaching. She reached for the shotgun by habit, then relaxed as she recognized Deputy Collins. But he wasn't alone. A woman rode beside him, heavily pregnant and looking tired. "Mrs. Cole," Collins called out, touching his hat. "Sorry to intrude. This is my sister, Mary. Well, her husband passed last month, and she's got nowhere else to go. I remembered you knew herbs and such. Thought maybe—" "Of course," Clara said immediately. "Come inside, both of you." Mary Collins was young, maybe 20, with frightened eyes and work-worn hands. She sat gingerly in the offered chair while Clara bustled about making tea. "When are you due?" Clara asked gently. 2 months, maybe less." Mary's hand curved protectively over her belly. "I'm scared. Mrs. Cole, the town midwife, said there might be complications, and with Thomas gone—" "You're welcome here," Clara said firmly. "For as long as you need." Deputy Collins cleared his throat. "I know what folks have said about you, ma'am, the wolf business and all. But I saw how you were with Billy Parsons, knowing where to look. And Mary needs help I can't give." Clara met his eyes. "The past is past. Your sister needs care, and she'll have it." They settled Mary in the small, lean-to room Ethan had built for storage, quickly converted to a cozy space with a proper bed and Clara's softest quilts. Over the next weeks, as Mary's time grew closer, Clara found herself with an eager student. Mary wanted to learn everything herbs for pain, teas for strength, the signs to watch for. "You're not what I expected," Mary confessed one evening as they prepared tinctures together. "The way people talk. I thought you'd be frightening, unnatural." Mary blushed. "Different, anyway, but you're just kind." "Kindness is its own kind of power," Clara said, "one that frightens people who prefer cruelty." When Mary's labor began on a stormy May night, Clara was ready. She'd helped with animal births all her life, had studied her mother's midwifery books, had prepared every remedy she could think of. Still, when the contractions grew fierce and Mary cried out in fear, Clara felt the weight of responsibility. "You're doing beautifully," she soothed, bathing Mary's face with cool cloths. "Your body knows what to do." Ethan paced outside like an expectant father himself, ready to ride for town if needed. But as the hours passed and dawn approached, it became clear that Clara's skills would be enough. The baby arrived with the sunrise, a healthy girl with her mother's dark hair and a voice that announced her displeasure with the bright new world. "She's perfect," Clara said, placing the wrapped infant in Mary's arms. "Absolutely perfect." Mary wept with relief and joy, cradling her daughter close. "I want to name her Clara, if that's all right. Clara Hope Collins." Clara had to turn away to hide her own tears. When she composed herself and turned back, she found Mary had fallen asleep, the baby peaceful on her chest. The sight filled her with a longing so sharp it took her breath away. She found Ethan on the porch, watching the sunrise paint the mountains gold. "Mother and child are well," she reported. He pulled her close. "You were magnificent. I could hear you talking her through it, calm as a mountain lake." Clara leaned into him. "I want that someday, our own child." "It'll happen when it's meant to." He pressed a kiss to her hair. "And if it doesn't, we have each other. That's more than enough." Deputy Collins arrived that afternoon, nearly weeping with relief when he saw his sister and new niece thriving. Word spread quickly through the territory the Witch of the Mountain had safely delivered a baby when the town midwife had predicted disaster. People began coming after that, not in mobs with torches, but quietly, seeking help. A mother with a fevered child, a man with a wound that wouldn't heal, a young couple wanting herbs for fertility. Clara helped them all, asking nothing in return but respect for her home. Funny how fear turns to need. Ethan observed one evening after she'd treated a whole family for summer flux. "They're seeing me as I am now," Clara said, "not as their fears painted me." By autumn, even Cranston had come, hat in hand, to beg treatment for his wife's persistent cough. Clara gave him the medicine without comment, though she saw the shame in his eyes. On their anniversary, the real one, from that spring day with the silver rings, Ethan led Clara back up to their sunset bench. The aspens had turned gold, setting the mountainsides ablaze with color. In the valley below, their cabin sent up its familiar smoke, the garden heavy with harvest. "No regrets?" Ethan asked, as he had that first morning after they'd truly become one.
None,
Clara said firmly.
this is the life I was meant to live.
The town's calling you a healer now instead of a witch. Same thing, different word. Clara smiled.
Both mean a woman with power they don't understand.
A howl rose from the forest, the wolf's evening song. Other voices joined it, creating a wild harmony that echoed off the peaks. Clara tilted her head back, letting the sound wash over her. She was the mountain's wife now, truly and completely. Not sold or bought, but self-made and freely given.
They promised you a gentle bride,
she said, threading her fingers through Ethan's.
Are you disappointed?
He laughed, rich and full. They promised me a gentle bride. Instead, I got a force of nature, a woman whose tender hands healed my wounds and drove me wild with love I never thought I'd feel again. He turned her to face him. I got more than I deserved and everything I needed. Clara kissed him as the sun set behind the mountains, painting the world in shades of fire. Below them, their life waited: the warm cabin, the thriving garden, the people who came seeking help, the wolves who watched over it all. She had been sold for $200, but she had purchased her freedom with courage. She had been called cursed, but had become a blessing. She had been promised as a gentle bride, but had emerged as something far more powerful, a woman who knew her own worth, claimed her own place, and loved with the fierce tenderness of the wild itself. The mountains sang their evening song, and Clara Cole sang with them a hymn of choice and chance, of love found in unlikely places, of lives rebuilt from ashes and pain into something beautiful and strong and free. She was home. Thank you so much for listening to this story. I'd love to know where in the world you're enjoying these tales. Please share in the comments below so we can connect and exchange thoughts about Clara and Ethan's journey. If you enjoyed this story, please subscribe to Wild West Night. Give this video a like, and don't forget to hit the hype button to help more listeners discover these tales of love and courage in the American frontier. Until our next adventure, happy trails.